how not to set up a recording business. I thought this was more useful because this will be things that either we've discovered by doing them and then regretting them, or we avoided them and now feel really glad that we did so. So I think that might be more useful. And then at the end, or even in the middle, if you have questions about what to do rather than what not to do, please do fire away and ask them. Ben told you a little bit about what we do. Basically, some of what you heard there that he was talking about is one of our USPs, and if you know, I'm sure some of you know what that is, unique selling point. That's one of the things we're going to talk about. Our unique selling point is that we have a very, very homely vibe. So people come and they feel incredibly comfortable. We get really good performances out of people because they're not having that sort of red light frenzy that they're worried about in commercial spaces. The clock is ticking, etc. We kind of avoid that vibe. But you will have your own USP, and I would encourage you to think about that and start kind of developing it, etc. So, the slides are just here to remind me. They're not really that much that you need to sort of pay strict attention to. This is just about me. I do the studio's operations and business development. I'm usually the first point of contact for artists who want to come. And Barclay, who can wave because he's here, is the engineer and producer. He also teaches music at HE level here amongst other places, and also provides individual tuition to students. So we're kind of a team. So if you're looking at setting up a studio or a recording business just by yourself, it will be slightly different than what we do. We have a sort of two-person operation. So bear that in mind. And the studio is kind of built around quality. That's what we try and do. That's another one of our USPs, is that we try and incorporate quality in everything we do. So we're not where you go to get the cheapest deal. You know, we hopefully are where you go to get high quality recordings. And these are built around sort of 5 areas that I've put up here. Quality instruments and amplifiers. So we've got a grand piano. We've got acoustic and electric guitars that are high quality. We've got a Hammond, We've got a Hammond with a Leslie speaker, Fender Rhodes, etc., etc., and some high quality amps as well. We've got quality microphones. So microphones obviously are the backbone, heart of your studio. And we've got condensers, dynamics, ribbons, etc., for all kinds of sources. Quality signal path and monitoring, which means classic British designed, does it have to be British designed preamps, boutique compressors, some of which we've had designed specifically and built specifically, analog console, high quality conversion, your quality DAW, DAW, Pro Tools as one of the accepted industry standards for audio recording, a Mac with Waves plugins, and quality spaces. So we've got sound treatment, soft furnishings, the instruments have really been thought about where they are in the room, etc., etc. Okay, so those are kind of the areas. I would argue, no matter what your setup is, you need to be thinking about all these things. So even if you're maybe not able to do something where you can fit a grand piano in, that's fine, but you still need to think about what is your space, what is it trying to achieve. Okay, so my animations aren't working. Good. So I guess you're just going to have to see them all at once. That's fine. So how not to begin. So we're set up as a partnership, but that's also our business model. So we're not a limited company. I don't know if you've had what experience. We're probably quite a mixed ability group here in terms of business experience. But you're going to have to decide what type of business model you want. Are you going to be a sole trader? Are you going to be a partnership? Are you going to be a limited company, etc., etc.? The simplest is just being you. You're a sole trader. A partnership is actually the same thing, legally speaking. There's just 2 of you. You can even have a partnership with 3, whatever. But that's basically just, you're not putting in place a lot of legal backing behind what you're doing. You're just setting up to start. And most successful sole traders and partnerships that I know of concentrate on a really slow and steady build. So you don't kind of open up It's not like a car dealership, you know, you open up and tomorrow you're in business, and you know, what you're doing is you're concentrating slowly on getting clients and setting, you know, getting yourself set. So number one of what not to do is don't be in a hurry. So don't think that next year you're going to be earning your sole income from this recording business that you set up today. You know, you need to be patient. It's not really probably how it's going to work. And along those same lines, don't invest tens of thousands all at once. So probably most of us can't anyway, so this might be a pointless point here. I don't have tens of thousands to invest all at once. If you do, great. But even if you do, I would say maybe don't do that, because you do have to think very practically as a business. Are you going to make that money back? You know, how long will it take you to make that money back? What of those things are just nice to have things, and what of those things are necessary? We recently did an exercise where we had to insure all of our kit, and we found out it was worth tens of thousands, but that's been built over 20, 30, a long time. So, you know, you're getting the odd piece here and there that you really want. The mic you've been coveting, you know, you can get these pieces slowly, and before you know it, you will have a nice big amount of kit. I'm going to get my exercise today.
Sorry, I don't know what's going on with my computer.
This will all be edited out of the video. So every time I'm pressing it, it's like, yeah. What am I doing wrong? Do I just need to touch it?
You're not doing anything wrong. It might be something I've set up.
So number 3, I've got don't hire commercial premises. Now, hiring commercial premises is an incredibly convoluted process, and has a lot of expense associated with it, especially once you get into paying business rates, etc. We've seen a lot of recording studios in the past 10 years open and close within a matter of a few years because it's just not sustainable. Now that's not to say that one day you can't have your flash studio in your commercial premises, but I would suggest starting out without doing that, without going to that kind of expense. We'll get into this a little bit later, but then you'll need to think about, okay, well, what can I do in my own space? What kind of, can I hire spaces? Can I do location recordings, you know, etc. Look at your other options. Opening up a large commercial facility as your first venture is probably not advisable. Plus, as we've noticed, this industry, music, recording, which is still in a state of massive flux, a lot of studios are going, a lot of it is going back to the sort of cottage industry model that you had before the big boom in the 70s and 80s, you know, where people were just recording stuff in their back room or their parents' garage or whatever. Lots of it is going back to that kind of model because the return on investment that you can get is lower, so you don't want to be going to that massive expense. Don't spend lots on setup costs. That's just what I've said before. So, you know, when you're thinking about, oh, let's have a huge sign made and it can be neon and we can, you know, no. Just, that's a great idea, but don't do it. Those can be your little fantasies. Don't actually do them. You need to make profit. Therefore, you need to make more than you've spent. Therefore, spending money on your big flashy sign or whatever that's not going to actually get you clients is probably not advisable. Number 5, this is really important. Don't do flaky market research. And the reason I know is because I've done flaky market research. I thought I did a good job on my market research. I thought I understood what was available out there, who my competitors are. You know, you go on Google and you search whatever you search and you feel job well done. But you really need to try and think about your market research instead of from the point of view of you who's trying to set up a recording business. You need to look at it as a client. So what's the client searching for? What search words are musicians who want to record looking for? What are record labels looking for? What are, if you, I don't know, want to teach, what are students looking for? Think in the mindset of the person who you're trying to engage, not yourself, because there are different types of research. So market research is really about being in the market. So imagine yourself being out in that market, trying to find people like you. See what people are doing, see what they're offering, check out their prices, check out their, not just their prices, but what models they're using, how are they charging, where are they based, what kind of music are they catering for. You know, don't just look up studios, Leeds, because tons of those won't be your competitors. Some of them will be doing electronic music and you don't do electronic music or whatever. You know, you really need to look, dig down one layer down when you're doing that market research. Number 6 is don't compare yourself to others. And this is a really important one. Let me try and explain. You should always compare yourself to others in that you should check your work, you should check your quality, you should look at what else is out there, etc. But what you shouldn't do is compare your, I don't know, success or progress or whatever to others. Because you don't know what other people's situations are. So you may see someone who's running that commercial studio you always wanted to run, who has been going for 5 years, and it's swish and flashy, and you see their social media, and you see that they've got all kinds of clients in, and you just think, what am I doing? I'm such a failure. You know, they might have a really, really rich dad, or they might be giving all their studio time away for free to friends because they can get clients, but they still want their social media feed to look good. Okay, so you never really know what's going on behind what you see. So I think if you can help, you know, keep on your own path, keep your own goals in mind, keep your own passions and the reason you're doing this, keep all that at the forefront of your mind instead of what you see anyone else doing. A really good example is Abbey Road. We recently went to Abbey Road studio, and obviously, you know, it's Abbey Road, so it's all very exciting, and it is very exciting. But you know, they're running a lot of projects that are not your typical huge band, you know, that cut a #1 last year and won a Brit Award. They're also hosting hen parties. They are doing teaching opportunities. They're doing lots of things to keep their business afloat, which is awesome. Kudos to them because they need to keep their business afloat. But everything isn't always how you imagine it. And sometimes when you dig a few layers beneath, you find actually, you know, it's not as it's maybe perceived. So try and keep those things out of your mind because they're only going to clutter you and make you and send you off course. Don't wait for clients to come to you because they're not going to. They're not going to. If you're sitting there and you have a cool logo, that's not going to do it. You have to find your clients. And not only do you have to find them, you have to treat them so well. You have to treat them so well that they would never imagine going to any other studio for their next project. Like your clients are your absolute bread and butter, and they will on occasion come to you, but most of the time they won't. So, and we'll talk a little bit later about how to do that, but don't just sit around waiting for clients to come to you. Number 8, don't forget the so-called soft skills. I said so-called because I really hate that they're called soft skills. But all the skills you need, like the human skills, the being able to notice when your artist is having a bit of a crisis of confidence, being able to, you know, anticipate what your clients might need when they're with you, being able to answer emails that in a way that is really concise yet warm, being able to deal with conflict when it does come up. All of those things are so massively important, and I think they're important in 2 areas. They're important in the actual studio. That's what a producer is there for. These days, probably as engineers, you're also going to have to be producers. You're going to have to be really nurturing your client. But it is also in all of the customer service stuff around that. So before and after they're with you in the studio. So all of the, even as you're quoting, you know, everything you do, you've just got to be so good with your people skills. Some people are naturally good with their people skills. Some people have to work harder at it. I would encourage you to work at it if that's you. And the one thing I can say with confidence is that it gets so much easier. You know, the first few clients that you have to deal with or the first few problems you have to deal with are so stressful, but then you really get so much better at it. You're able to kind of deal with it quickly. and easily. Number 9, don't make inclusivity an afterthought. I should really put this number 1 because it makes it sound like I was making it an afterthought. Inclusivity. I noticed you've got your he for she here. Women's Solidarity Movement for Gender Equality. I'm all for that. A lot of studios have been very much a boys' club, and depending on your genre of music, they've been very much a white boys' club. You really need to think about how your studio and how your experience looks to someone who's not exactly like you. So you need to think of, you know, there was an article recently that I read where someone had come in and, you know, the first thing in the studio was a huge poster of Roman Polanski, okay, who is a known sex offender, has abused young women for years and years and years. That might feel slightly different to a woman walking in who's aware of all that than to a bloke who really likes Roman Polanski films and hasn't really thought about it before. You know, I'm not saying you can't like Roman Polanski. I'm just saying the people coming to you might not like him, and you need to think about that. You know, you need to think about your interiors, you need to think about your messages, and you need to think about your graphics. So if you're building websites, you know, are you using stock photos? Are you using photos just of yourself and your mates? How are you going to make people feel welcome in your studio, and people who are not necessarily just like you? If you only want to serve people just like you, you are going to have a much harder time making profit, A, and B also, it's just not nice, is it, or good? So, 10, don't talk more than you listen. Obviously I'm doing that today, but that's just because I'm giving a talk. Normally, I wouldn't. You are in a role that is focused completely around client care, so you need to hear the client. I think also in our industry, there's a big tendency to big yourself up, you need to sound confident, you need to talk the talk, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine, but it does sometimes end up sounding like you're probably more talk and less delivery. You know, you sound like you're a bit full of it. So we tend to, when we get sort of first artist phone calls, if I'm in the room and Barclay's taking that call or vice versa, we'll both notice the other person isn't really talking that much. That's because we're listening to the client. We're asking maybe a couple questions to just get them to talk more. So it's all about really hearing from them, not telling them how great you're going to do, what a fantastic experience it's going to be working with you, etc., etc. If you listen to them, they're going to pick that up. They're going to think that they're going to have a good experience with you, just intuitively. Is this helpful? Okay, moving on. So, how not to charge. This is a really big area, and I could go on, the whole talk could have been about this, actually. Number 1, don't work for free. Okay, just don't work for free. There's a fantastic website, which, if I can figure out how to, no, I can't. I don't know how to use my links, apparently. It's really easy because it's called shouldiworkforfree.com, and it's got this fantastic flowchart. So any project, anytime when you're thinking about working for free, I really want you to go visit shouldiworkforfree.com and follow the flowchart round. So, you know, it'll start with like, is it for a charity or nonprofit? And then if you go up to yes, then it says, do you mean a band? And if you say yes, then it tells you no, do not work for free. If you go, you know, is it a legitimate business? Yes. Did they promise you exposure or a good portfolio piece? Yes. And if you follow that up, actually it says, never, ever, ever, ever take this job. It is the most toxic bit of bullshit you'll ever be fed. No, no, no. That's what it says up there. This one's my favorite. Is it for your mom? You go yes, and it just says yes, do the job, for God's sake. You know, 2 days in labor and you can't do a little job for her. So I really encourage you to go shouldiworkforfree.com, and you'll find that almost every single job comes to no. There are sometimes you should work for free if it's a cause you really believe in and people, you know, really aren't paying any of the other professionals that they have, you know, on that charity gig, etc. But most of the time it comes up no. And exposure is a medical condition that you die from. Okay, just remember that. Number 2, don't forget your billable hour percentage. I don't know, does anyone know what a billable hour percentage is? Like, have you heard of that before? Okay, well, basically when you work for a job, you go there for 37.5 hours and you get paid for 37.5 hours. Hopefully, I know there's some variance there. When you work for yourself or run your own business, only some of the hours you do earn you cash, right? There are a ton of hours you do that you cannot invoice anyone for. So when you're doing your accounts, when you're taking those phone calls from prospective clients, when you're answering that 100th email from that neurotic singer who cannot get your messages round in their head, whatever, those are all things you cannot bill anyone for. Now, they say you're doing pretty well if you've got a 75% billable hour ratio. I have done extensive time tracking because I'm a total nerd and have found out that mine sits more around 60 to 65%. That may be because I care too much, maybe. Do I care too much about doing the job right? I'm not sure. But I think you are never going to probably ever get it above 75, 80 unless you're really lucky and you maybe have some like regular profitable contracts that you kind of have been doing for a long time, and so you don't have to do any of that other associated work with it. So when you figure out that billable hour percentage, then you can figure out that you're probably not charging enough. You're charging what you figure you need per hour to live, but you may not have figured out that also you've got 25 to 40% on top of that you can't charge anyone for. Don't undercharge. This is really important. There's a few reasons not to undercharge. One is not to undermine the industry. You have colleagues out there who are working too, and they have a living they need to make as well. If you come in 50% below all that and undercut everyone, it's not very sportsmanlike, okay? Sports people like. But also, the main reason really is that a reputation for being cheap is near impossible to shake. So once people know that you're the guy or you're the gal who will do it for F all, then you will never get anyone to pay you properly, because it'll always be, oh, but you did such and such, you did them a deal, you did this for such a da, da, da. And that's maybe fine when you're, just starting out and everything, but 5 years later or 10 years later, when you cannot get anyone to pay you properly and you're trying to, pay a mortgage or whatever it is that you were trying to get to, that's going to really start wearing on you. It is fair that people with less experience might be a bit cheaper than those with more experience. That's fine, but you really need to think about that and kind of, not overdo it. Don't underestimate the challenges facing artists in today's market. This is a really big one. So back in the day, someone could come and they could cut an album with us, and they could go and they could sell that album on their tour, and they could be in the black. Nowadays, no one's going to probably buy their CD. They're probably not going to even have CDs cut, because what's the point? Will they get enough downloads to actually make the money back from the album that they've made? So to many of the people we work with who are unsigned artists, independent artists, this album is to document their music, to get them more gigs or tours, to get them festivals, to put on their social media channels, etc. It serves a slightly different purpose than it may be used to. Although I'm sure they're also selling albums, but the point is they're not counting on their album sales to actually make them back what it costs them to cut the album. So you need to think about the fact that those are real challenges. And while I don't think you should undersell yourself, and you definitely shouldn't work for cheap, you just need to be understanding of what your clients are kind of facing, and you need to adjust your offer accordingly. So like some of the things we do, we've come out with different ways of paying. We've come up with offers, so those wanting more studio time really get quite a good discount because they book you know, maybe 6, 7, 8 days, whatever. Just think about what will actually help your artists, because as I said, your artists are, you know, that's your bread and butter. So you need to work with them as partners. I guess that's what I'm saying. And on there, although I can't click on my links apparently, there's can we share that? Can we share a link to this when we?
Yeah, we can. You should be able to just go right on the trackpad. You might be able to follow the links. Nothing happening.
I'm going right on the trackpad.
Sometimes you have a.
Did I have a mouse?
The mouse. Yeah.
Got a mouse, you guys. I could have done the work for free. Graphic. That's all right. I'm gonna leave that for you guys to look at. This is no.
So that may
Do I have to control click?
That may appear on the screen you've got down there.
It is.
So you can click and drag that window off to the right, then it should appear miraculously behind you.
Need an engineer?
This is. I was gonna say this is just so user friendly. That's what I've loved about this. How do I get my mouse back here though? Oh, there. Sorry, guys. Nope.
It's a press and click that trackpad, it's not a...
Yeah. How far do I have to drag it right? I'm like really dragging it very far right.
Does it go to the left?
Hello? No. It's not massively important. It's just a really nice infographic showing you how many streams an artist has to have to make even minimum wage. And it's quite shocking. So your artists are either fitting their music in around their other jobs, or they are really don't have a lot of money. Which is an arguable reason not to get into this line of work, because if your clients are poor people, then you're not going to really decrease your chances of turning a profit. So yeah, so this is just a really good infographic, which again, we'll share this on the thing, showing you, can I scroll? Is that?
2 things.
Nope, I'm scrolling the one behind me. Look. Nope. Scroll. Okay, so here we have this little pink dot is, what is the pink dot? The pink dot is how many in sales an indie artist needs to have to make minimum wage. So here, a self-distributed album, CD, you have to sell 105 a month to make minimum wage. 105 a month, okay? That's not just 105. On Bandcamp, you have to sell 148 and so forth. When you get down to iTunes, you need to sell 210 a month. And I don't know, the types of bands we're working with, they're not selling 210 albums a month, I'm afraid. Downloads, you have to have 547. So you have to have a single track downloaded 1,826 times a month. On iTunes, Amazon, a single track download. Oh, this is for a signed artist. So a signed artist has to sell even more. A signed artist needs to sell 5,478 to make minimum wage. But what gets really fun is when you get down here into streaming. This is for a solo artist to earn minimum wage. Look at that. That you have to have on Google Play 70,000 streams a month to earn minimum wage. Oh no, now I've done something wrong. Stop. You have to have 29,000 on Tidal, 70,000 on Beats. This is good. This is Rhapsody, 104,000. Apple Music, we have no data. I love this. No data. That was their official submission. Thanks, Apple Music. No data. Deezer. Spotify is brilliant. I need to have 180,000 streams this month if I'm going to make minimum wage. And YouTube. This is YouTube. YouTube requires 700,000 plays. And this was actually before they changed recently they changed all of their advertising revenue rules and stuff, so I'm sure it's even worse now. I was really just showing you that for fun. You don't really need to know all that. You just need to know that your artists are not exactly loaded and they're not making tons of money off whatever they're creating in your studio. So you need to treat them as such. They are artistes. They are there because of artistic integrity. They're not there for the money. Okay? Going back now, if I can. Can I go back? No? Ben, my lovely assistant.
Not so useful.
Well,
Which one we're on?
and can I put that on the whole screen? Okay. So that leads nicely into the next one, don't charge per hour. We actually do charge per hour, and it's a mistake. We're going to try and change that. Really, you're better charging, people call it by the drink. You know, you need to have like 1 song costs this, 1 to 4 songs cost this per track, 5 to 8 cost this. I don't know. An overdub on 2 tracks costs X. You know, you could have a whole catalog. The ones we've seen it done successfully, you have a whole catalog of different things. You know, a guitar track costs this, a backing track costs X. You know, this many instruments costs Y. So I would really, and don't just make those up. You need to do some really, really careful calculations. How much time is this likely to take? How much do I need to be earning per hour? What other associated costs are there with it, et cetera, until you get to what you can comfortably, you know, record a track for. And don't forget about edits as well in that, because it's always how long is a piece of string. If someone wants to come in and correct every single little bum note that they feel they made on the piano or whatever, and they want to do all those edits, and they're going to spend a day doing that, that obviously can't be included in your 1 track. So just be really clear, I suppose, with your methods. Number 6, this is kind of depressing, but don't trust people to pay. Have clear terms and conditions and take a deposit. We learned this the hard way, so I would just suggest always taking a deposit. If anyone makes you feel like that's a weird thing, then there's someone you don't want to be working with, because they're going to be a complete pain in your backside. It's normal. If you have your kitchen built, you pay a deposit for the materials. Like, it's not a weird thing to ask for a deposit. So if someone makes you feel like that's weird, just ignore it. And I would also suggest not releasing any files until you've been paid. So we tend to say that, you know, we'll give you, as soon as the invoice is cleared, you'll get the file. So that doesn't always work. Like, if you've got a situation where someone's needing to sort of choose tracks or whatever, for, you know, it doesn't always work. But you can tend to give rough mixes, or, you know, something that can't actually, don't give anyone any stems or anything like that. I think that's really important. Don't undercharge. This was kind of the same as what I said before, but in this particular one, I have a nice link here, which you really do need this link, because it's brilliant, and we'll include it in the video. Do proper calculations to find out what you need as a daily rate. So there's this fantastic online calculator that basically tells you what you're going to be coming home with based on your rate. So I don't know if you can you zoom in on that at all? Okay. So if you put in your day rate here, and then it asks you things like, you know, how many days are you going to be working? How many weekends do you expect to be able to have off? How many holidays? How many sick days? How much sales and admin time and unpaid time? That's what we were talking about with those billable hours. So if you put in maybe 25, etc. So if you charge £100 a day, and you work, you have a normal amount of weekends and holidays, you're only sick 5 times, and you spend 25% of your time on unpaid tasks. Remember, I spend about 40, so, you know, you hopefully, good luck if you can spend 25. Then that will bring you to this income of £17,000. That is just barely the living wage, okay? The real living wage, not what the government says the living wage is, but the Living Wage Foundation has calculated what it costs outside of London to live, and this is what it costs. That means you're not going to the theater or the opera, you're not going out that often with your friends, you know, that's just to live. Now that doesn't even take into account these other things. What professional services are you paying for? Let's say you have someone do your taxes. You know, let's put in $200 for that. Your hardware and software, I mean, you've got to, you know, when your computer packs in, you have to buy another one. You unfortunately are going to have a lot of those costs. We have a lot of software monthly costs now because we do things like time tracking, invoicing, you know, lots of different, oh, they're only small costs, but they add up when you've got them all over a month. The things you need to run a business. You've got your office costs, which may or may not be, like, for example, Barkley over here, the engineer, is very, very lucky to have someone who's really good at doing all of the office side of things, but you might not. You might have to outsource that skill. You might have to hire someone off people per hour or wherever you're going to get, you know, you might need to get admin support. So those office costs might be higher for you. Let's say you do everything yourself. That does mean your billable hours are probably going to go down because you're spending a lot more on unpaid things. Sales, you know, are you doing any merch? What are you doing to actually get clients? Are you running an ad anywhere? Insurance, you're definitely going to have insurance costs. Even if you cut this sales thing down to, you know, 200 pounds, and your miscellaneous costs, who knows what's going to happen. That has already brought you down to, you know, only making 12,000 pounds a year. You know, you can't live off that. Okay, so maybe what we've discovered from here is that 100 pounds a day is not really a sustainable charging structure. It might work if you don't have any living expenses, maybe, but eventually your mom is going to get sick of you. So just bear that in mind. Okay, so sorry, Ben, can I get you to put that back? So I'll send you that link, but it's really good to play around with because you might have an idea in your head like no one's going to pay me more than 150 pounds a day, but you need to put that 150 pounds into that calculator and you need to really figure out how much you're going to actually be coming home with and whether it's sustainable. You know, and if it's not sustainable, then maybe it's something you just need to be doing on the side, or, you know, you need to make your decisions with very open eyes. So how not to go on or how not to continue. So you've got yourself set up, you've avoided all the pitfalls, and you're doing it now. You've got a couple clients, whatever. So what do we need to not do now? Well, we need to not try and catch every single market, okay? The person who wants to cut a hip-hop album is not going to go the same place as the person who wants to do electronica or, you know, house music or whatever, jazz, easy listening, library music. You know, you can't do everything, and you need to figure out what it is you are doing. So a good method for that is diversify and specialize. And we're going to come back to that at the end. So I'll tell you a bit more about what I mean by that. Don't assume that the client understands the process. Okay, the client is not an engineer. The client did not study music production. The client may be a complete technophobe, for all you know. Okay, so hold their hand through every step if they need it. We learned this the hard way because we had clients that just didn't understand, through no fault of their own, that, you know, recording was a different thing from mixing. So, you know, they came and they played and they thought that was that, and wait, why are they having to pay for more? So really make sure that clients understand. And I think the best way to do that is a nice visual, you know, there's probably plenty of YouTube videos now that you could point them to. We made a little PDF that just sort of, you know, tells you, don't make it too wordy, just kind of outline the steps. Often people don't forget about mastering. We don't do mastering in our studio, we send it elsewhere, so we always outline that right at the beginning. Remember about mastering as well, you know, you just need to really hold their hand. Don't ignore the importance of a mailing list. This we have ignored the importance of, and now we're regretting it. Social media is great, but it's not always really effective for when you have very specific messages you'd like to get out to people, trusted clients who really know and like you. You may have some deal you want to put on. You may have some new offer. You may want to run some feedback sessions. You know, there might be all kinds of reasons you might want to contact your clients. And if all you've done is emailed them and now you have to go back and you have to look at who you've ever emailed in the last 5 years so that you can contact them, that's going to be a real pain. And in fact, now it's not even legal. So with GDPR, you have to get express consent from people to contact them. So don't ignore your mailing list, the importance of building it up, but also don't ignore GDPR rules, because it really only takes one, someone can sue you if you get it wrong. So get it right. There's plenty on the internet to learn about it. It's riveting reading. I would really suggest you jump into that. Number 4, don't take it personally. So the problem with doing something that has an element of creativity to it is that you often have an emotional connection to your work. So as an engineer or as a producer, you're basically just open to a critique session every single time you work. And that's hard. Maybe you can develop a thick skin, but it's actually quite hard. One of the great things about us being a partnership, me and Barclay, is that when Barclay's done the work, it's really hard for him to then negotiate about money, because he's done the work and it's all a bit awkward, and it's great to have someone from outside who's a sort of neutral person come in and do all that. So you don't really have to, have sticky conversations or whatever, because I just come in and do it. If you don't have that luxury, if you're a one-person band and you have to do it all, then I wouldn't suggest really getting a thick skin. I'd go more zen about it, become a little bit detached. I've done my best work. I've paid attention to detail. I've spent the time that I've charged for, and probably more, because you always do. I'm putting this out there. The client is going to come back with criticisms or with things they don't like or whatever. That's just the way it is. Don't take it personally. It's work. Just look at it as work. Just pretend for a minute you're in an office and they're just talking about, the annual report you've done. And they found a few flaws. That's fine. You can fix them. Try and take that kind of attitude, because it gets very hard. And we've had a few situations where clients have sort of changed their mind in the middle of the process, or decided the thing that they wanted. There's one member of the band that's come back and actually didn't want that, wanted a different thing. And it all gets very unpleasant and difficult. And I think it's really hard not to take it personally at that stage. But just try to remember, it's not personal. It is the nature of working in the arts. Don't forget the neighbors. Wherever you set up, most of us won't be lucky enough to have a commercial facility miles from everywhere. So be considerate. Don't do things at all hours of the night, even though that's when you're most creative, or whatever your excuse is. Use headphones then, and during the day come back and rebalance or whatever. And if, a bottle of wine doesn't go amiss, you can always thank your neighbors for being patient and for, understanding your line of work. And 6, this is a big one. Don't assume you will work only in music production. Build a portfolio career. You will sometimes be working in music and the arts, and you will sometimes probably have to go make some money elsewhere. That is not a failure. That is, capitalism. Do we like capitalism? No. Must we participate in it? Yes. So, build a portfolio career, and where you can, integrate it with the things you love doing. So, we do a lot of workshops and teaching in music and in music production, because we love that. You can try and keep your interests sort of as integrated as you can, but also don't be averse to, making your bread and butter from other places too. Most of the artists that we know work in all kinds of different ways. You have to be flexible. I guess that's my point. Be flexible. Okay, so now so next steps. What can you do once you walk out of this room to get you on your path? Well, I would suggest diversify and specialize. So don't try and do everything. And what we mean by diversify is sort of what are the things you can do with your setup? It may be modest at this point, but what are the various different things you can do? For example, you only need a good microphone and, some duvets, and you can record voiceover work. What can you actually do? So we've got on here just some examples. Equipment rental, format conversion, voiceovers, backing tracks, location recording, film and TV, electronic press kits for artists, sound effects, games, music, instrumental, you know, what can you do? Think about the various different things that you can actually do. And then specialize. This is something that an engineer working out of Nashville, a guy called Fett, kind of pointed this out, this diversify and specialize thing in a podcast I was lucky enough to listen to. And I thought it was a really great way of thinking of it, because you do, I guess if you say just concentrate on the one thing you do, that's good, i.e. don't try and appeal to electronic artists when you're an acoustic instrument studio or whatever, but still diversify, so still be flexible in what are you going to do, what are the different things you can do. And then with the specializing, you know, are you going to be known for being a tracking studio? Are you going to be known for being an overdub studio? You know, mixing, mastering? Are you going to go analog or digital? Are you going to do specialty audio like, you know, surround sound or whatever? Are you going to be known for having in-house musicians? So you've got a whole bank of musicians people can use. So that might be composers who are doing library music who actually need, you know, a string section. Maybe you know that string section. You know, are you going to appeal to certain genres? Are you going to be known for your vintage gear, et cetera, et cetera? If you're starting out, I would think about really thinking about that newcomers versus experienced. I mean, you might want to be known for being the place where people go for that very first album. You know, it's the first time they've ever recorded, and you're kind of there to guide them through that process as a first timer. Those are just examples. That's not a definitive list. Right, so the next steps. Concentrate on putting together your MVP and getting clients. So, does anyone know what an MVP is? Anybody? Obviously, most valuable player, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's a minimum viable product. Okay, it's used a lot in the tech sector. You don't spend forever tweaking your tech solution that you're going to put out into the world, your app. You get the minimum viable product. You make the quickest thing that you can actually get out and get people using and trying. Okay, but it really works well across all sectors because you need to test the market, and the best way to test the market is being in the market. Okay, so you don't want to spend all your money, get your perfect setup, make everything amazing, have your logo designed, get your letterhead printed. Do people print letterhead anymore? No, okay, never mind. Print your business cards. You know, get your signage made. Do all this stuff to make this perfect thing that then no one's even interested in. What you need to do instead is get your minimum offer. Like, what is the quickest offer you can get? What can you offer people now, or in a week, or whatever? That quickest little product you can get that you can start testing. So that might be your voiceover. You have one good microphone, you have a bunch of duvets, you have a space in your house that you've thought would work really well for it. There, that's your minimum viable product. Go see who you can get to buy it. Because the problem is, and this is we've learned the hard way as well, is that what you need in business is flexibility. So you need to not be wedded to your one idea. So if your idea is that you're going to make the best jazz album in the whole of the UK, and they're going to be excellent, and that's that. Okay, fine. But maybe no one is making jazz albums this year, or maybe no one in your vicinity is, or maybe there's someone just around the corner who already has that reputation, or maybe whatever. So you need to be flexible enough to think, okay, well maybe I'm not going to do that. Maybe what I'm going to do is take the expertise I have in jazz and really work on, you know, film and TV music and how that might work. You know, you need to just be really flexible. So I guess the longer you spend making your perfect thing, the more wedded you are to it as an idea, and the harder it's going to be for you to let it go when it's not actually working, when it's not actually selling. Yeah? So basically, get together that minimum viable product and go get clients. But this leads us to the question, how will we get clients? Well, that is a good question. There's some ideas here. You know, if you're a musician yourself, then you probably know a lot of musicians. If you've been recording for a while on your degree, you probably know a lot of musicians because you know students who have been in the studio with you. So record for fellow musicians. You know, don't work for free, but you could do it very, very cheap. You could get, you know, I'm going to do this for you. All I want in return from you is this amount of money, which is a fraction of what you would ever pay anywhere, plus some testimonials that I can put on my website where you tell about what it's like working with me, you know, and if I can ask you to recommend me to others. But don't tell them what you paid here because I'm never doing it for this cheap again. Some sort of deal like that, okay? So that you're getting a two-way, you're getting something out of it as well. Get in touch with local music groups. Go to gigs, that's the main thing. Who was it who said that? Be on the scene. Thelonious Monk, was it? Yeah.
Be seen beyond the scene.
Be seen beyond the scene. You have to get out. You have to be where your clients are. You know, if your clients are rock musicians, you need to be going to rock gigs. If your clients are, you know, classical musicians, you need to be going to classical gigs. You need to get into the scene that you're wanting to be part of. Also remember that teaching expands your audience, okay? So if you hate teaching, please don't teach. That's, I'm begging you. But if you don't mind teaching and you quite like inspiring others, teaching really does increase your audience. You know, depending on the circumstances in which you teach, you might even meet hundreds of people. You know, it's a good way to kind of expand your reach. And also, it keeps you relevant as well. You know, you're always learning from students. You're always learning what's changing, what challenges people are facing. So yeah, they expand your audience, as do speaking engagements, as do panels, being part of panels, etc., etc. And finally, you could also teach other bands how to record themselves, okay, and even rent out your space. So if they don't want to be beholden to having to employ an engineer forever, maybe you can give them some basic recording lessons. Maybe you can help that trio you know learn how to at least record those 3 instruments. And then when they do need a space, you might even offer renting yours. So these are just some ideas of where you're going to get your work. You know your scenes better than I do. You know your friend networks. You know your social media networks. You know, mine your networks and find clients. And I think that has come to the end of our discussion. So I hope that's been a good introduction. What questions do you have? Yes.
So, I mean, we're just starting out with sound, location recording and post-production, so not necessarily music. But we're wondering, because you said, generally speaking, you shouldn't work for free, according to that website. But, I mean, should there be a balance between, because that's one way that we would get clients, get to know people, is to work for free to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you think that's a good thing? And then when kind of like, would you then say?
Well, I think my experience has shown me that the problem is once someone hasn't paid for something, they're never going to pay for it. So when you say that's how you'll get clients, I mean, I would say a client is somebody who pays. So a person you're working for free isn't a client.
Well, contacts is.
Yeah, that's like a contact or a favor. So I guess I would always, I've actually come to be really strict about this over time. I definitely didn't used to feel like this, so this is a new thing. And every time I work for free, I regret it. So every single time. And I'll give you just an example of, like, we went and did a gig, didn't we, for a charity, and it was at one of my favorite like eateries that was a family-owned, great place. It was a great charity. It was all great. And we arrived, all the gear, and you know, we set up all the gear and blah, 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 and the communication had been rubbish before. So the whole thing had taken tons more time or energy than it needed to because, you know, because I was doing it for free. And then the person who was in charge of the whole thing just kept throwing things at us. left, right, and center. Oh, we don't have a sound system. We'll need to use your mic. Well, for what? For the bit where we do the raffle and where we do the. Well, hang on a minute. You asked me to come and play and sing and perform. You didn't ask me for a sound system for free. I would actually not really give someone a sound system for free because that's my gear. So actually, no. But we had to because then we were in the moment and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, the whole thing, it was thing after thing after thing. And then, no, they needed it for the whole night. So we needed to leave and then come back to get our gear that we were giving them for free, you know. And it occurred to me, after all this headache, I was so annoyed about, that they had actually, the person who was running the whole thing was on a salary, thus being paid to be there. He would have been taking lieu time the next day for work because he'd worked that night, so he was being paid. He wasn't expecting himself to do it all for free. And I think that's when it occurred to me that I wasn't necessarily helping that charity by doing all those things actually. Because what I was doing was giving that charity a completely unsustainable model of running their events and a totally unrealistic idea of what they should be able to expect people to give for free. So it's only over bitter experience that I've come to be this person who says, no, don't work for free. And the other thing I've learned recently through another set of experiences is that the problem with, maybe it's a problem with capitalism actually, I don't know. But the problem is that production and your productive value is inherently linked to money. That's the world we live in. So what I've learned is that if you work for free, and you may be delivering an incredibly high level of professional capacity, you may do excellent work. If it's volunteer work, it doesn't really count as work. So when you go and tell someone later, you know, you've done this, this, and this, and you list it on your CV, people do not take it seriously. And you may have done really professional work, and you may have done a better job than you even did in that paid gig you did over here. But because it's listed under volunteer experience, or because someone finds out that you did it for free, or because whatever, suddenly no one respects you. No one respects the work. No, you know, it counts for nothing, unfortunately, in this world. So I guess I would say it is a real challenge because it's hard to get clients, and you know, I get that. I guess I would say you need to be getting at least something out of it. You need to be getting something, and that something cannot be exposure. Because unfortunately, the other thing we've learned, is that free work only leads to more free work. That's all it leads to. It never leads, you know, to something paid. It just doesn't. That's the idea, but it doesn't ever happen. So it just leads to someone else saying, hey, will you come do this thing? I heard you did that thing, you know. So it doesn't lead to paid work. So I guess if you're getting something out of it, like if you genuinely do not have a show reel, like you genuinely have nothing to show in this new area that you want to expand into, and you're getting that out of it. But I would even argue then, well, why can't you just go make the music on your own? You know, if you're serving someone else's need, why are you doing it? And why are they not willing to pay for it? Because that's an interesting question to ask. Because if the reason is that they can't and they have no money, then I would argue, why are you expanding into that market then? If no one in that market can pay you, then you shouldn't go into that market. So I kind of think you need to take a really, you know, black and white, like numbers. You need to add up the numbers. What do they equal? And you need to be quite harsh with that, I think. So, yeah. And if you can manage to do something for free that you genuinely do get something out of, you know, I don't know. I can't think of something off the top of my head, but okay, maybe some B&B wants you to do their radio advert. They have the voiceover artist. They want to record it in your studio, and they want you to do that for free. Well, maybe they can give you a weekend away in their B&B. Like if you're genuinely, you know, you should be able to get something. You know, you should never get nothing out of the work. That's my advice. Sorry, that was a really long-winded answer.
That's good, thank
You can tell I'm very bitter about it. But if you ask established artists, they're all bitter about it. That's the thing. Everyone. And that's from musicians right through to, you know, to engineers, right through to marketing, like everyone. Everyone is sick of working for free, you know, because it just isn't something that goes anywhere. You know. Other questions? Anything that I didn't explain well or didn't, something you were hoping you would find out when you came to this?
Thank you. You mentioned that a lot of your client base is indie artists, and I was wondering how have you found the market for approaching indie record labels and them as paying clients? Is it viable? Is it?
Well, we know some people who run some indie record labels. We don't actually ever, we almost always work with the artists themselves, yeah.
A lot of the time the artists have made their own label.
Yeah, lots of,
And
yeah,
a
so
lot of
actually,
it's that way.
yeah, so that's
Or
not.
the producer that we have someone who uses our studio as a dry hire. He's created his own label, his own acts he's coming through, he's trying to do everything.
Of course.
So more and more creative people are having to be the entrepreneur now. This is the challenge that everyone has, that is the industry is atomizing so much.
So yeah, so I guess we have actually worked with the indie
But not
labels, but they're usually the artists who started the labels.
They're not someone who turns up in Mercedes and says, well, we can sign you for this. No, they turn up in an old beat up Skoda and they play the drums in the band as well at the same time and make the coffee. Oh, we didn't talk about that, did we? Hospitality.
Yeah, that was in my client care thing. You treat your clients very, very well. Yeah, so
and
yeah.
T-boy as well as engineer.
Yeah, you have to be T-boy, T-girl as well as engineer. Yes.
You know, you were talking about streaming services.
Yeah.
How come they pay so little?
Oh gosh. If only I could answer that question.
Silicon
They
Valley.
pay so little. I'll tell you why they pay so little because I know exactly why they pay so little. They pay so little because tech geniuses figured out that if they created the structure on which we hung our music, they would be rich. And they are. And those who shall remain nameless are absolutely rolling in it. The people who've created Spotify and whatever else, they are making bank. And they do not need to divulge a lot of their sales figures because of privacy agreements with the labels. But they are making bank. And they are screwing artists. That's why, unfortunately.
One artist we worked with, Kirsty McGee, she had a song in a film by Danny Boyle called Trance called Sandman, you might have seen it, and that track has had something like 1.5 million downloads on Spotify easily, and I think she's made something like £600.
It's great.
Whereas Pink Floyd would get 1.5 million downloads, they're sure as hell not getting 500 because Spotify has made separate deals for different established acts and record labels aside from the individual client. And this is the unfairness of the industry. And so some of them already have mechanisms behind them. Other smaller artists are trying to make it, they just don't have those sort of same things. But they're found the same way, their material is heard the same way by the end user. And it tells a lie that this is a great way of hearing music and it's all equal, everyone can find you, this marketplace. But actually behind the scenes, not everything's equal. It's Animal Farm, unfortunately. And big labels have come back in there and absorbed it. You know. There is money out there, but you know they're all interested.
If you wonder why you change through the radio stations and you hear Ed Sheeran on every single one, but a different Ed Sheeran track, that is by design. That is not by accident. And it sure as hell isn't because he's so fantastic. Okay.
Why on earth do musicians put up with this? Why don't they boycott these sites? Why do they not engage with these people?
I mean,
Gaslighting.
well, I think you could say that about any group that hasn't had the rights that it should have. Why do they put up with it? I mean, if something's been built so well that it's incredibly hard to challenge it, you know, it's strong. That's why it's not being toppled. You know, why hasn't capitalism been overthrown? Because it's a damn powerful system that would be very hard to undermine at this stage. That's what has happened with music. I mean, the powers have cemented themselves, and they're just incredibly hard to shake. And when you say, why do musicians put up for it? They put up with it because, you know, they can't get the gigs unless they work for free. And then it's just a cycle, and they never, you know,
And
some of them do get out of it.
And they're distracted because they have to have day jobs.
Yeah, lots of them
Yeah.
have to have day jobs
So
as well.
they you know,
That-
where they find the time to create music. and
Having a
create
day
music
job
takes time.
cuts down on your revolutionary abilities, I'd say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I've found anyway.
You did point out the whole thing about actually there's more pressure on the artist now to be the entrepreneur. Whereas like 15, 20 years ago when there was more of an industry at the indie lower end scale, I think it was there was a bit more of a support network. Maybe not as much return as a big label, but it was still there. But that's evaporating even more and more. That's a shame because so much talent and so much creativity has just not been heard.
But there are new models that people are using, you know, and there's a lot to be said for the subscription model. So artists who have music that's compelling enough to get fans that are very devoted, sometimes they're called super fans, you know, they can find that having even a relatively small fan base can still sustain them through things like, if you've heard of Patreon, you know, where someone can become your patron and pay you a small amount each month, but if you get enough of those, you know, you can make a relatively okay income. I mean, we've seen a lot of those models. So there are, the tech possibilities aren't all just oppressive ones. There are some that have really genuinely helped artists to find new ways of making income. And things like Bandcamp that are really artist friendly and help the artist take back a little bit more control. So it's not all gloom and doom.
But the point is we understand when the client comes, we know what the challenges are.
Yeah,
so
I think
we have to adapt.
I think it's important. It's important to be aware of all these things as a person whose client base is facing those challenges. You know, because you really need to be empathetic about them and also realistic. You know, about what they can or can't do. Yeah.
Would you do something differently in the process of producing something if you knew it was going to be not on a CD but on a streaming site?
Well, we always know it's going to be on a streaming site. I mean, almost everything we record ends up on a streaming
Do you
site.
have to do it differently, like the
Oh, you mean
mix,
technically speaking?
technically,
Ah,
yeah.
right. Okay. Do you want to answer that?
Oh, right, no, not necessarily on a track-by-track basis, not necessarily, but at the end of the day, they still need to sound like they're the same. But I suppose with streaming, so there's this thing called loudness that was talked about a lot, and this is I suppose one of the good things that's happened recently with the algorithms of Apple streaming and YouTube streaming. A few years ago, everyone would try and make their track as loud as possible, so it sounded louder than the other. But now they've got the algorithms now where if you make your track too loud with too much no dynamic range, YouTube's algorithms or Apple's algorithms will just turn it down anyway. So it's brought some kind of things back in there. But when it comes to mixing, most of us will work within a certain kind of parameter that works. So for example, we're all influenced by a certain type of music and we're mixing a certain way. So if I'm working with, say, Kirsty McGee and I've heard where her influences are or have my ear on some of the things she likes listening to, I've got a print in my brain about what I want hers to sound like, and I'm aiming towards certain technical things. So that aside, that's relatively straightforward. When it comes to going out there, you know, you can't avoid having a good mastering engineer. That's why, and it's one of the things I don't like doing because you know, making a judgment call on your own work is one of the hardest things you can possibly do, and that's where you have a trusted mastering engineer who can make the right judgments for the work that you create to make sure it's prepared for the wider world. Not to mention they probably have much better speakers, better listening environments than you do. So all those sort of things are part and parcel of what we're trying to do with the artists. So at the end of the day, I haven't noticed any difference in approach that I've done, whether it's been streamed or whether it's played over CD. I suppose the one thing that has changed is that I pay a little bit more attention about what it sounds like on headphones, as I was speaking, because a lot of people listen on headphones. But then, of course, you know, you might be playing it just off your phone, it's on your phone, or it's streaming, it doesn't really make much difference. I haven't really found anything like that. What I do know, though, is that whenever you upload your audio or your little film clip to YouTube or something to what used to be Spotify, not Spotify, SoundCloud, or did I say YouTube?
You did.
Sorry, YouTube, Facebook is another one people upload their music. There's something in the upload, they compress the data so that they can get it on their service and other people listen to it. It does mess with the quality of sound. So that does steer you a little bit when you are doing your mix. And unfortunately, you have to work harder to make the quality of your raw stuff much, much better if it's to survive that process. And this is part of the thing that, you know, when a new client comes in, this is where we absorb a lot of the extra effort with the undermining of how much people can pay to come to the studio. I actually have to work that much harder for less money and hourly paid, if you like, to make sure that product is at better quality. Because if it doesn't sound good on a download or Facebook, people say, oh, that doesn't sound very good.
And then it reflects badly on you.
On me.
Yeah.
So, in a sense, you know, that's where I'm charging less. even though it might look like I'm still charging a day rate, I'm actually having to run twice as fast in that day to try and keep that quality up. And you know, that's
and
where
yet
sustainability.
Facebook is making plenty of money.
Well, they buy elections, don't they? Oh, okay. Watch that. But yeah, it's a costly thing. I think we might need to mention feast and famine as well. Have you ever heard that expression, feast and famine?
Yeah.
Be prepared for it to do this, your business, which is why don't rely on any one sole thing.
Yeah, that was the portfolio career thing. You know, you're going to have times that are dry, you're going to have times that are really busy. We've often had our summers have been quite dry. Then this summer, unbelievable amounts of work. It's really unpredictable, you know, so you've got to, as well as that whole calculator about showing how much you're earning, you've also got to figure out what you can put away, not just for taxes, but for the dry days, you know, so you've got to figure out, I mean, I could do an entire thing on cash flow, you know, you've got to get your head around how to manage cash flow, which is really hard. So yeah, but again, that's one of those things you could hire someone else to do, you know, you could find someone who can do a few hours a week for you to kind of get on top of your cash flow and whatnot. There's always somebody. Yeah.
You briefly, I think, mentioned something about no one uses business cards anymore. Because we were actually thinking of getting business cards. Is that something?
I mean, I was kind of joking.
Okay.
Business cards are pretty
Scared.
low expense anyway. I mean,
Yeah.
you can get a bunch made for not very much money.
Yeah.
I guess I was saying, don't spend forever, you know, on Canva.com designing your perfect business card,
No.
because in a year you might not even want it to say what it said, because it's that thing about being flexible.
Mm-hmm.
Anything physical that you have made isn't flexible, so you can't change it. So yeah, I guess it's, have your business cards made, but just don't think your business cards are more important than finding your clients, you know?
Yeah.
And your clients may not need a business card to find you. I mean, with Google now, all they need to remember is that your name was Barkley and it was something about Valley and Studios, and they'll find you. So yeah, I mean, have your business cards. They don't cost that much.
I mean, what would you say is one of the best ways of promoting yourself as a business?
Well, honestly, and this one's not nice for a new person to hear, word of mouth. Like, we get literally almost all of our business comes through word of mouth because someone's had a really good experience. Somebody recently had recommended us before they even worked with us. So they'd come to see the studio, decided they wanted to work with us, had something in the diary for 2 months later, and they recommended us to someone. And that one came in before, so people, their experience of us was positive enough to recommend before they'd even seen our work.
But this is going to the non-billable hour, isn't it? Because what was it? They were there with us for an hour and a half to check the studio out, and we
I
spent
was
time
trying to get this a
discussing.
positive spin. Now you're raising it in negative.
Business manager.
Honestly. Yeah, no, it's a good point. So yeah, your impression that you leave on people really does, it's definitely your best selling point. You know, the more just people liking you. And I remember picking up some really great advice from, who was it, Neil Gaiman, and some, I don't know him personally, he'd done a talk at a graduation thing, and I think he'd said, you know, you need to deliver quality work, you need to deliver on time, and you need to be a pleasure to work with. And then he was saying, but even 2 out of 3 will make it. So if you deliver on time and your work is really, really good, you can be a miserable fucker. You know, if you deliver on time and you're a pleasure to work with, people might not mind if your work is kind of average. And if you are, you know, always deliver great work and you're a pleasure to work with, people will let you off for the deadlines, you know, so just make sure you get 2 out of 3 and you'll probably get most of your work from word of mouth, I would think. And the thing with art is, the thing with music is, people, I don't think it's a flashy advert that convinces you to go and do something. You know, it really is the people. So I'm not going to trust my songs or my whatever I've poured my heart into with somebody based on them looking cool or whatever. You know, it really is that. Those soft skills and those really being a personable kind of person, and they need to trust you with their work.
I look cool.
Yeah, you do. Obviously, looking cool really helps. Obviously. Yeah.
Have you had any experience with pay-per-click advertising?
We know. Well, we've had a bad experience. But that was just because we didn't know what we were doing. I would suggest it apparently is pretty good, but you really need to know it inside out. So again, that's your market research thing. Anything to do with marketing, you know, like don't just take out a Facebook ad. You need to understand how they work, and you need to understand who they target, and you need to understand why yours, you know, how yours will target, all that stuff. You need to be members of Facebook groups so that then the algorithm finds people who are connected to those type of groups. Like, it's very complicated. So I would just suggest reading a lot. And also, when it comes to anything like that, any kind of pay-per-click advertising, Facebook ads, Google ads, anything, make sure you're reading the absolute most up-to-date everything. Because an article, a blog post on Google ads from 2017 is not maybe going to help you, because they change everything so much all the time. So yeah, we basically don't have the stomach for it, and nor the patience, so we don't really do it. But I would suggest doing it. I just can't be arsed. Any other questions? Yeah, Ben.
Quick one. I really enjoyed this talk because I think I probably made all those mistakes back in my mid-20s. I stumbled across a flat that was built into the ceiling of an old cinema. It was beautiful, massive living room, literally the space that you're sat in there. There's a lot of room, comfortable, but it's my home as well. So we ran it for a studio for a while, and it was my home. So I'm just really interested in how you manage, you know, it being a home as well.
Yeah.
Those sorts of things.
We're actually massively lucky because we have a lower ground floor. So our home is like on a slope. So the back of the house, which is the basement from the front, actually opens up onto the garden. So it doesn't feel like a basement because it's more a lower ground floor. And we have now managed, and it did take a while, to completely separate it from the living space. So basically, the piano used to be in the living room, and we had the multi-core going up through the ceiling. We changed that so that now the piano's downstairs as well. So everything's contained downstairs. So it's evolved, isn't it? It's evolved over time, though. But we felt we needed to kind of get that demarcation between home and work.
That was what I was most interested in.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I guess a lot of people will be setting things up in their houses, and not a lot of people can afford commercial premises. And
absolutely.
And
when I say lucky, it was a series of events actually that led us to even find that house. So that house we bought purely because we knew it was perfect to have a studio downstairs as soon as we saw it. But it was not in our price range. It just happened to be that some people were leaving the country, so they really needed to sell fast, and then it was a whole series of. That's why I'm saying don't judge your own successes by what you see other people, because you don't know what they lucked into or what. We happened to buy our house our first house when the market was when everything was really cheap. You know, like it's.
However, before that, I did location recording, and I just had a small room to mix at home.
Yeah.
So I had a different way of working. So I designed my system with my computer and my interface all so it could be packed into the back of the car, and everything was location.
Yeah.
We'll make any space a recording studio, and actually bands love that.
Okay. And I do think
but
as
then
well,
it gets to a point where you want a bit more autonomy.
Yeah, and you do have to respect the people that you're living with. You know, I mean, we're lucky we're both musicians, but if he weren't one or I weren't one, we would have to take a different approach. You know, like if I weren't a musician, I might not want 17 guitars hanging in my living room. That's just weird.
What do you mean? What are you talking about?
But it's fine because I am. So I think you need to respect your space in more ways than one. You need to respect what the other needs that other people have, and also if you can make as versatile spaces as possible. Like for example, in the we've got like 2 live rooms, and then we've got the room. My brain is not working.
I can show something. This does audio as well, doesn't it?
It will do if you're on the PC. Yeah.
So
if anyone needs to go, I know we're running over, so I won't.
But I suppose it's a valid question because they can see the. I need to go to the value channel, and we can show some things.
So basically, what I was trying to say was we've got a bunch of sofas, a bunch of soft furnishings in all the areas that the musicians are in, but every single one of them turns into a bed. So we can either we often do have residential, so people that come and actually stay as well as record. So we've had like a couple,
Well,
someone come from overseas or wherever.
here's an example, just so you can see the space. How's it go up and
The
volume?
audio's, what do I have to do?
Right, okay, so how do you turn the sound on? Is it muted?
Yeah, it's muted at the moment. Just
Is that it?
no, it should go higher.
Okay, so this is the control in front of the house. Put the saxophone player in the lobby. He's got headphones. He's got sidelines to the drummer in the back room, which is also where my nephew stays, because the sofa is a bed. There's the double basses.
So we get the sound separation, but still can get our sight lines with that glass door. So all these can double as living spaces. And we've also got like a small kind of toilet area, which has a shower for when they're residential. And then there's space there for drinks station. We're not going to make you listen to jazz for 8 minutes and 55 seconds, don't worry. Are we, Berkeley?
No. I'm currently standing in the toilet bathroom. And that's the bathroom, and then through back, and here's the piano room in the back with the bass player. So they're just living spaces.
These sound separators here are just built from literally a frame and stuffed with rock wool and then some cheap calico fabric from the market. You know, all made by Berkeley. Well, in the, you know, you have to just kind of DIY it, make your own thing.
Yeah. So it's all been self-built and lots of stuff, and you really do to do it yourself.
And basically, this is phase 2. This was not phase 1. Like phase 1 was in a little attic room, and you know, you have. That's what I was saying about being patient. Yeah.
But what did you say the thing was stuffed with?
Rock wool.
Rock wool slabs. You get them in bales of 10 from Homebase.
Like that's
Wicks.
like rock and then wool, like
Quite
a
good
sheet.
for a
Literally,
industry
my
treatment
accent
thing.
is rock wool.
Yeah, it's what's usually designed to go in between the walls. It's not that stuff which is silver and yellow.
It's not Kingspan yet.
Insulation, or
It's insulation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But in America, it's called Owen's calling. They call it rigid fiberglass, but you can cut it with a knife. But it's quite flexible. It's very itchy.
Yeah, be careful.
Trust me. Even if you wear rubber gloves, psychosomatically, you think you itch afterwards. But I've made 20 of them. I'll hang on the walls. They come off. I make little booths and all that sort of stuff, and then I hang them back up on the walls.
Great.
And the other added benefit is when we're not recording music, it makes our house sound really nice environment to be in. I don't understand why more people don't do this. They certainly did in here.
We have the lecture theatre with the most amazing flutter echo.
Yeah.
So you can find us on valleywoodstudio.com. If you do have any questions, just pop us an email. I'm usually in that 40% of non-billable hours. So I'm often answering a couple questions. So yeah, thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you.